The red vinyl. A tape recorder spun in an empty trailer while fire consumed the pier. Mark stood at the edge of the black water. 3 sedans forming a closing circle. The red vinyl record clutched against his chest like a heartbeat that didn't belong to him anymore. The ocean was 30 feet down. The guns were already drawn. 13 hours earlier. Gray dust clung to Mark's thumb as it flicked through the manila folders. The filing cabinet screamed. Metal on metal. A sound that had no place in this quiet Victorian attic. Rain drummed against the cedar shingles outside, heavy and rhythmic, turning the air thick. He pulled the tab marked Vance Elias Estate 2024 and set it on a stack of yellowing newspapers, their 1999 dates bleeding into the dust. The crate of LPs smelled like mold and time. His fingers stopped on a record sleeve wrapped in thick, heat-sealed plastic. No artist name. Just a hand-drawn saxophonist in black ink, jagged and urgent. The gloved hand trembled, plastic crinkling in the quiet, sharp, metallic, a small pocket knife, a silver flash. The blade hissed through the seal, and Mark slid the vinyl out, deep, translucent red, like a held breath made visible. The center label had one word typed, discordance. He turned it over. Attached to the back was a photograph, yellow-edged, faded, a young man with a saxophone, a young woman standing beside him. The woman was his mother, 25 years younger, but unmistakably her. Same sharp cheekbones, same dark eyes. The pulse in Mark's neck became visible. Wind whistled through the eaves. His phone came out, cracked Samsung screen, cold in his gloved hand. To Sarah, found something weird in the Vance estate. Need to check it out. Send, the digital whoosh of departure. The alley behind the blue note was all neon blue and wet cardboard. Mark stumbled over a damp box as he exited his car, clutching the red record like a football, like armor, like the only thing keeping him in one piece. The shadow lengthened first, then everything accelerated. A man in a heavy fisherman's coat stepped from the dark swinging lead pipe. The pipe caught the edge of the dumpster with a metallic scream. Sparks showered into the wet air, orange against black. Mark ducked. His briefcase swung upward, full of audit notes, audit papers, the structure of other people's lives. The briefcase impacted ribs. A muffled grunt. White papers flew out like startled birds, hitting the ground, the rain taking them, spreading them across the street like feathers. A second man grabbed him from behind. Arm a vice around the throat. The world compressed. Mark's heel drove down onto an instep. A sharp pop. He threw an elbow back into soft belly. Gagging. Release. The old Volvo. Driver's seat. Door slamming. A fist smashed into the side window. Spider webbing the glass, not breaking it, not yet. The engine groaned. The tires found traction. Blue exhaust smoke clouded everything behind him. In the rearview mirror, a distorted face pressed against the fractured glass, disappearing. Mark's trembling hand lowered the turntable needle onto the red vinyl. The surface was scratched. Deep scratches like memories that had tried to erase themselves. The speakers hissed with a low-frequency hum. Wind rattled the window pane. Outside, the storm was consolidating its power. A saxophone solo began, haunting and distorted. 30 seconds of sound that seemed to come from underwater, from another dimension, from a place where grief learned to play notes. Then it cut. This is Elias. If you're hearing this, they finally killed me. The voice was gravelly, terrified, recorded over a low hiss that might have been from the needle or might have been something older, something already dying. Mark leaned in close to the speaker. Extreme shadows stretched across the room. The floor lamp cast everything into relief, sharp and terrible. "The mayor," the voice said. "It's the mayor. Insurance claims for the docks. Staged deaths. They use my records to hide the data. They encode information into the grooves. Nobody looks at vinyl anymore. Nobody listens." The voice stopped. Mark picked up the photograph again, flipped it over. On the back, in his own mother's handwriting, he knew that handwriting, had seen it on grocery lists, on birthday cards, on the margins of his childhood. "My brother Elias," the only one who knew the truth about the fire. The record kept spinning. The needle rode the groove like a message from the dead. Mark couldn't hear anything else. Just the word brother echoing. Just the realization that everything he thought he knew had been built on ground that had never been solid. The park bench was damp. Sarah sat on it with her hands buried in a beige trench coat, looking at a black SUV idling 50 yards away. Her fingers worked the fabric, picking at a loose thread. A man with a long-lens camera sat in the driver's seat. Mark stopped at 10 feet away. His breath came fast. "Sarah, get up. We're being watched." "I know," she said quietly. "I've known for an hour." The SUV door flew open. 2 men in suits sprinted across the grass. Mark grabbed Sarah's arm, and they bolted toward a row of dense hedges. A gunshot cracked the air. Not a sound effect, not a metaphor. A real bullet that caught a bronze sailor statue and sent a cloud of bronze dust rising into the morning fog. Mark shoved Sarah over a low stone wall and turned to face the pursuer. An extendable baton swung down. Mark caught the man's wrist, twisted it with a sickening crunch, and headbutted him. A wet thud, droplets of red across white fabric. The second man came fast. Mark picked up the discarded baton and swung it into the man's knee. There was a sharp crack, not bone breaking cleanly, but something worse. The sound of structural failure. A howl. The taxi was waiting. Tires screeching, blue exhaust smoke. Sarah gasping beside him in the back seat. "The ledger," Mark said. "We need the ledger." The condemned boathouse was all rotted wood and the smell of abandoned things. Mark pried loose a floorboard with a rusted crowbar. The wood splintered. Underneath, wrapped in oilskin, was a leather ledger with mayor's office, discretionary embossed in gold across the spine. He opened it. The page was dated June 12, 2018. 3 names, dollar amounts beside each one. Elias Vance, $500,000. Under payout status, it said, "Staged accident." The handwriting was bureaucratic and clean, like the penmanship of someone who had never had to look at their own reflection. Mark's jaw tightened. Waves slapped against the pier below, the sound of the ocean's indifference. Sarah pointed to another name. Her fingers shook. "Mark, that's me. Sarah Jenkins, pending. They're planning my death next." Her hand shook, then her arm. Then her entire body seemed to collapse inward, to implode with the knowledge that somewhere in an air-conditioned office, a ledger had already assigned her a value and a method. A tear fell onto the page. The phone rang, and Mark answered because there was no choice to answer or not answer. There was only the voice on the other end. "Mark, your mother is here with me at the town hall. She looks lovely. Don't do anything rash with that record." The mayor's voice was calm, authoritative. The voice of a man who had never been told no by anything except mirrors. Mark's eyes widened. His hands made fists. The vein on his temple pulsed like a second heartbeat. In the mayor's office, 16 stories above the town, a man in a crisp navy suit sat behind a massive mahogany desk. He was holding a framed photo of Mark's mother. He smiled. An empty expression, the kind of smile a stone wall might wear if it learned how. The grandfather clock in the background ticked. The gold signet ring caught the light. The shipping container yard was a canyon of rusted blue metal. Rain was a solid curtain. Mark walked through it like he was wading through something thick, something with weight. A flashlight beam cut through the dark and blinded him. A massive man in a raincoat stepped into the light. Heavy wrench in his hand. He swung low and caught Mark's hip. The impact was a shattering thing. Mark fell hard into a puddle of oily water. Iridescent swirls marked the surface where he'd landed. Through the pain, sharp and consuming, Mark grabbed a discarded industrial hook from the ground. As the enforcer lunged, Mark swung. The hook caught the man's coat. He pulled. The man's face connected with the metal wall of a container with a hollow bong. An indentation formed in the blue metal. Mark mounted him. 3 quick punches to the jaw. The man's body went limp. Mark stood limping heavily, breathing like he'd just come up from underwater. The trailer door opened to a small room. In the center, on a folding chair, sat a mannequin dressed in his mother's bright yellow coat. A tape recorder was taped to its chest. The clicking sound of it starting filled the space where his hope should have been. The mayor's voice played, "She was never here, Mark. Family heritage is a heavy burden, isn't it? Elias died for it. You will too." A digital timer with red LEDs began its count. Red light bathed Mark's face. Red like the vinyl. Red like evidence. Red like the color of things that had been burning for longer than he'd been alive. Mark dived through a glass window just as the trailer erupted. The orange fireball consumed everything behind him. Shards of glass and fire filled the air. His hair singed, his face contorted. The deafening roar. The high-pitched tink of falling glass. Searing brightness against the black night. Mark hit the wet concrete and rolled toward the edge of the pier. 3 black sedans formed a semicircle. The freezing Pacific Ocean was 30 feet below. He looked up at the headlights, so bright they created long shadows of the end of things. Blood from the temple ran into his eye. Mark's hand reached into his jacket. The bright orange flare gun came out. He'd swiped it from the container yard an hour earlier, tucked it into his coat without thinking, some animal part of him preparing for a moment he hadn't known was coming. He fired it directly into the gas tank of the nearest sedan. The flare gun's thwump. The hiss of the projectile. Bright orange light illuminating everything. Then the explosion. Mark jumped backward into the dark water. The impact was shock and cold. His body tensed against it. The ocean took him. Above, a second explosion. A muffled crump. The sound of the end moving one direction while he moved in another. He held the red record, now in a waterproof bag, against his chest. His legs kicked. The cold was a living thing. The darkness was absolute. The town hall auditorium was filled with light and people and the mayor at the podium basking in applause. Then the back doors slammed open. A drenched figure stood in the doorway. Blood streaked his face. Water dripped from his clothes onto the red carpet. Mark's lungs were still burning from the ocean. His legs barely held him. The mayor turned pale. The applause stopped mid-clap. Mark marched to the sound booth. He shoved the technician aside. A digital player connected to his phone slammed into the system. The mayor's own voice filled the room, magnified and unavoidable. Insurance claims for the docks, staged deaths. The crowd turned to look at the mayor. Their faces shifted. Recognition of what they were hearing. Recognition of what they'd been voting for, believing in, trusting. The mayor tried to run. But the sheriff, sitting in the audience with his uniform pressed and his expression unmoved, stood and stepped into his path. A hand placed on the chest. The gesture of someone who had seen this ending before. The handcuffs clicked shut. Click, click. The sound of systems working the way systems were supposed to work when nobody was paying the right people to keep them broken. A week later, the cemetery overlooked the ocean. Sunny but cool. Mark stood before a new headstone. Elias Vance. He played the truth. He placed the red vinyl record against the stone. From his pocket, he pulled a final letter. The envelope was white. His uncle's handwriting was on the front. For Mark. Inside. Mark, your mother didn't just know about the fire. She started it to save our family from debt. I took the fall. I hope you can forgive her. The words were simple. The meaning underneath them was not simple. Mark read them twice, 3 times. The paper rustled in the breeze. The ink was slightly blurred by what might have been a tear, or might have been water damage, or might have been the moment someone decided that silence was a kind of love. 20 yards away, by the Volvo, his mother stood. She looked at him with pleading eyes. Mark nodded once. A small gesture. A gesture that contained too much to name. He walked toward her. The slight limp from his hip. The bruises still fresh on his ribs. The ocean beyond, continuing its work of forgetting everything it touched. The car door closed.